The City of Phoenix holds community budget hearings throughout April, allowing residents to comment and make suggestions on the city manager's trial budget before final decisions are made. This public discussion is among the reasons the city's budget so closely matches the community's highest priorities each fiscal year.
Before we get started, I am going to ask our interpreter to please introduce herself.
Buenas tardes, me llamo Judy, soy intérprete de español. Si alguien necesita el equipo, está en la mesa de atrás. Gracias.
Thank you. So thank you all for being here tonight. Joining me tonight, along with many of the city staff from different departments, I also have a representative, Nicole Pastor, from the mayor's office, who's joined us tonight. Also, Jeff Barton, our B&R director. This is the process that we walk through to present the trial budget. We do 14 hearings throughout the city of Phoenix. They're all set up the same, just in different parts of the city. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to show you first a short video. Well, I don't know how short. It's about 17 minutes. And then we'll move right into the public comment. If you do want to make public comments, please make sure you fill out a comment card from the table. Also, make sure that you get a booklet that gives you an overview of the trial budget. What we'll be talking about today is the trial budget that the city manager presented, along with additional options that we'll discuss further in the video. And so I think with that, we'll go ahead and go right into the video, and then we can discuss more of the trial budget after the video.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your first look at the City of Phoenix 2016-17 City Manager's Trial Budget.
Input from our residents is very important, as your ideas can help shape what will end up being the final budget for the next fiscal year.
The final budget is important because it provides the plan for how the city will spend taxpayer money and how services that you depend on could be impacted.
I think the city manager's trial budget provides a great pathway for us to continue providing the outstanding services that Phoenix residents expect, and it gives employees the opportunity to continue to provide that great service every day.
Why is a balanced budget important? It's required by state law and city charter. In this trial budget, there is a $60 million surplus that can be used to improve essential services that will benefit the community. Examples include public safety needs, employee compensation, and restoration of some programs and services. So how does the funding work? Funding for the city budget comes from three sources: the general fund, enterprise funds, and special revenue funds. Examples of general fund city departments include police, fire, the library, parks and recreation, and streets. Enterprise fund departments include aviation, water services, solid waste services, and the convention center. Special revenue funds account for designated sources of money for a specific purpose, like sales tax dollars for the hiring of police officers and firefighters, and funds for public transit.
So how did we get here? Under the leadership of the mayor and city council, we are glad to say the budget is balanced.
The mayor and city council have really set the tone and direction for our city staff and employees to be focused on innovation and efficiency.
Here's just some of the ways that happened. First, eliminating 119 vacant positions and other administrative savings actions that will result in an overall savings of just over $11 million. Second, there is a one-time carryover of $25 million from last year's surplus. Also, the city is saving by making needed adjustments to the Workers' Compensation Fund and has sold extra police helicopters that were too expensive to maintain. Did you know that Phoenix has reduced administrative expenses and has the smallest number of employees per capita in over 40 years? And while still providing great services, the city has reduced authorized staffing levels by more than 2,700 positions. That is 16% since 2007. Also, city staff is constantly finding innovative ways to save money. Did you know that since 2010, we have saved $106 million in taxpayer funding? Some examples: the municipal court. It saved almost $600,000 by eliminating a criminal courtroom and a civil courtroom due to lower court volume. Plus, a new process with copy services. By reducing the number of printers and copiers citywide and securing more competitive rates with copy contracts, the city should save hundreds of thousands of dollars each year. Now to rising pension costs, which continue to be an important issue. Thanks to the leadership of the mayor and city council and actions taken by voters, the savings from reform efforts will reach $1.1 billion over a 23-year period. And what a difference a year makes. Last year's 5-year forecast projected a deficit of up to $58 million. But with guidance from the mayor and council and the efficient work of city staff, that deficit was eliminated without reducing services to the community.
Mayor and council also expect us to provide great service, and that's what the city employees work to do every day.
One of the biggest challenges the city faces has to do with how the city will continue to make its debt payments for voter-approved capital projects.
We're at a place where we need to make tough choices, like any of us during the recession where you may have lost a job or your wife may have lost their job and your income changed and your bill stayed the same. So the city of Phoenix is at that point now.
Several options will be discussed, including increasing Phoenix's combined property tax rate. Phoenix has had the same rate for 20 years. That means since 1995, residents have paid $1.82 per $100 of assessed value for property tax. The rate has gone unchanged while the city's population grew and important services developed, like new fire stations, parks, and libraries. The city has been using a reserved fund to help pay off that debt. This has relieved homeowners from increases in property tax rates, especially during the recession.
What other cities in the valley, after the recession, they started to, when their assessed valuation changed, the values of their properties changed, they started to float their rate up and down so that they levied the same amount of money, brought in the same amount of income. What the city of Phoenix did, we thought that we would give our taxpayers relief. So we kept the rate at $1.82.
In the meantime, the city had debt to pay, so a reserve fund was used. This relieved homeowners from increases in property tax rates, especially during the recession. But now that well of backup money is finally running dry, and the city needs to raise an additional $37 million to pay the debt service. Otherwise, Phoenix's strong credit rating could take a hit.
We are taking in less money, and now we still have the same payments. Our payment on our mortgage is essentially our debt service. That's what we have to continue making. At the same time, we have other sources or other services that we provide. Those costs have also increased, and our ability to make those payments has gotten tougher and tougher.
The budget lays out 5 ways to solve this. A detailed explanation of these options are in the trial budget summary booklet, handed out at all public meetings and online at phoenix.gov/budget. Option number 1, increase the combined property tax rate by 35 cents to $2.17. This would equal an additional $4.25 per month on an average single-family home, about 14 cents a day. Even at this rate, the average single-family homeowner will still be paying less than they did back in 2009.
We could continue to provide services, infrastructure, pay our debt at the lowest, cheapest possible cost, and maintain a very strong bond rating, and to provide our citizens with good services for many years to come.
Option number 2, generate $37 million in other ways by increasing a local sales tax, a food tax, or perhaps an addition to your city services bill. Option number 3, use all of the $60 million surplus to provide property tax relief for 2 years. That means no money would be available to restore employee concessions or add community services, including those cut in previous years. Now keep in mind, with this option, the city would still need to find a solution to this problem in 2 years, and this could hurt the city's strong credit rating. Option number 4, use some of the surplus money to provide tax relief for 1 more year, along with some of our reserve funds. But the issue will have to be addressed again next year. Now, with this option, the city could improve some proposed services, but not all. And this option could hurt the city's strong credit rating.
Some of these other options are short-term, which means they're only going to provide a solution for 1 year, maybe 2 years. And it really is just kicking the can down the road, and we will be back in this situation in a couple of years asking for a solution from our citizens.
Option number 5, cut $37 million from the general fund by making significant cuts that would directly affect the city's ability to serve residents and business owners. The city manager has outlined $44 million in services from which to choose. This includes cutting $14 million from the police department, $10 million from the fire department, more than $2 million in library services, and $6 million from the city's Parks and Recreation department. In a service business like the city, dollars translate into the people who provide the services, like 911 response, recreation programs, senior and youth services, and more.
Since 2010, we've been drawing down our fund balance reserve for our GO bonds, and we're at the end of that. So this is the last year that we can use that reserve to pay our debt service.
How will the city tackle this debt service situation for the long term? The plan is to refund and restructure bonds as long as rates remain where they are now. Until then, one of the mentioned 5 options must happen in order to pay the city's debt service for the facilities we've built. This is critical in order to keep the city's strong credit rating, which lets the city borrow money at a low interest rate to fund projects that are important to you. A look at these 5 options are on page 5 of your trial budget summary booklet.
Here's a look at the new services proposed in the trial budget. Many residents feel that protecting the public should be the city's top priority. The mayor and council agree it's critically important to keep everyone safe. That's why public safety and criminal justice amounts to 72% of the general fund in this trial budget. The new budget adds $2.4 million for the first year of a 3-year, $11 million plan for Phoenix police officers to start using body cameras.
Well, body cameras mean a lot of things. Safety is one of them, transparency is one of them, trust is another thing. For our residents, it allows them to have greater confidence in their police department.
The budget will also allow the department to hire a director of employee assistance and wellness.
Our employees are our most valuable asset. We need to make sure we take care of our employees. By hiring this position, it allows us to do that.
Now to the fire department. The budget would spend $2.8 million in one-time costs to replace the obsolete Emergency Transportation Billing System, known as EPCR.
We are the last large city in the state of Arizona to move forward with EPCR.
Electronic records will let our paramedics spend more time on patient care and less time on paperwork, and make payments from insurance carriers more efficient.
The latest technology for us to do our jobs more efficiently, protect the information of the community, bill efficiently so the taxpayers are getting revenue back into the pockets in order to provide services to the city of Phoenix.
The budget also calls for spending $1 million to begin rebuilding the road to North Mountain, along with fixing the radio tower to make it meet industry standards. The radio tower is critical to the city's public safety radio system. Now, to dedicated public safety special revenue funds. Because these funds will be balanced next year, the budget includes the hiring of 130 police officers in 2016-2017.
Other than 2015, we hadn't hired any police officers for almost 6 years.
The council also approved a plan to hire 36 firefighters next fiscal year.
We have been fortunate over the last couple of years to be able to hire minimal amounts of firefighters. This will allow us to fill all of our vacancies.
Now, let's look at dedicated Phoenix Parks and Preserves initiative funds. Money would be used to maintain new dog parks, recreation centers, and playing fields. From the Development Services Fund, which is paid for by building permit and inspection fees, is this proposal. The city is seeing a huge spike in construction, which is great news. To keep up with demand, the budget calls for adding 8 new positions to meet the needs of all the growth. Out of the Solid Waste Special Enterprise Funds, the trial budget calls for adding 15 positions and equipment needed to support curbside green organics, diversion, and illegal dumping programs. This will ensure that Phoenix continues to be a national leader in keeping waste out of city landfills. The budget calls for a few additions that directly will help the members of our community. They include new funding to support the city's continued effort to get veterans off the streets and back on their feet.
So the proposed funding will support peer navigators who help veterans living on the street make all the connections they need to make to get into housing and stay housed.
And money to add staff and supplies for after-school programs for disengaged youth.
This funding would really allow us to increase our programming by offering STEM programs, physical activities, as well as interaction between the youth and adults in many of our city parks.
Looking ahead, One of the biggest challenges to the general fund continues to be the cost of employee pensions. The trial budget reflects an increase of $15 million in civilian employee pension costs. But since the mayor and city council took action on pension reform and the voters made their voices heard, these short-term increases will slow over time with a savings of more than $1 billion over the next 2 decades. Now to the police and fire pensions, which will go up $21 million. This is the result of a state Supreme Court decision. Increases in future years are partly because of other pending court challenges and system funding issues. Also, proposed reforms could help reduce how much the city will pay in the future. Then there's employee compensation. For 6 years, city employees have been part of the shared solution of our budget issues, agreeing to almost 6% in cuts to compensation. 4.2% of that is still in effect. The trial budget proposes to responsibly restore some of it, 2.6%, or $44 million, over the next 2 years. This is an investment in our most valuable resource, the workers. As a service business, the city depends on good workers to provide outstanding services. Keep in mind, the budget hasn't been adopted just yet. Your input is important, and the City of Phoenix wants to hear from you on what the upcoming budget should look like.
The budget is really for the people of Phoenix, and so for it to be the best budget possible, it needs to reflect what people have to tell us, and that's why we're out to listen to the residents in the trial budget.
In summary, the trial budget has several options, including solving the debt service issue by raising the combined property tax by 35 cents to $2.17. This would allow the city to use surplus money to add critical services to our police, fire, and other city departments. It would also allow the city to restore some concessions made by city workers 6 years ago.
15 public hearings will take place this month across all council districts, and you are encouraged to attend. Make sure you pick up a budget pamphlet outlining all the proposals and options at any of the public meetings or online at phoenix.gov/budget. You can also send your comments or questions to budget.research@phoenix.gov, or to reach us by phone, call 602-262-4800. You can also comment on social media by using #PhoenixBudget. Thank you for attending this budget hearing and being part of a very important process. The City of Phoenix is committed to its mission of improving the quality of life in Phoenix through the efficient delivery of outstanding public services.
So I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm Councilwoman Laura Pastor, and I represent this area. And it's very important to know that you have this booklet because on page 5, there's a summary of the options, of the revenue options, and then it goes into detail of option 1 through option 5. And when you come to the mic, it's very important to let us know which option you agree with. As we are listening to everybody, but what option is you want, like option 1, you like option 2, you like option 3, 4, 5. So it's very important to know because we're gathering that information. I am going to turn it over to Jeff, because if any of you have any questions about this, we probably should speak about it before we go into asking questions or telling us what they would like to see in the budget. Are there any questions on the options? Dave?
It does not specify how long the option 1, when would we have to do it again? I mean, what's the projection on that?
Sure. The projection is basically right now based on all of the assumptions that we've taken into account, property valuations, the growth in property valuations, as well as the interest rates and our ability to refinance. The anticipation is that that rate will stay for quite some time. And in fact, in the future, we think the rate will actually drop because we start to pay off more principal and more interest. And so the rate is expected to actually decrease before it increases again. I think if I remember off the top of my head, and don't hold me to it, I think it's between the next 3 to 5 years.
additional revenue going to go? Because 2/3 of the money for body cameras, for instance, we're paying 3 years out this year. There's a lot of set-asides in this year's budget. So when you collect that additional $30-some million in 2017-18, where's that, how do we have oversight in that money years forward?
So the increase that's being referenced now in terms of either option 1, which Ms. Pastor spoke about, or option 2, that actually does not take into account the operating budget at all. That specifically deals with debt service. So the 35-cent increase in property tax, or if one of the other options with additional revenue is actually brought forward, what they are to do is to pay the debt service on our secondary property tax. So right now, our GO bond program is funded exclusively with the secondary portion of the property tax. Our property tax rate is split into two. We've got a primary and a secondary. The primary rate pays for the operation and maintenance, so all of the staff and all the programs that we consume on a daily basis. The secondary piece is what pays our debt service, so that's like our mortgage on our bond program. It pays for all of our facilities and all of our parks and things like that. The 35-cent increase is going 100% to the secondary. It's not being allocated at all to the primary side. And actually what I would say on that is there are a lot of provisions in the state charter or the state constitution as well as the city charter. We can only levy on the secondary side what our debt services are. So that's another control that you as citizens have. We can't levy more tax on the secondary than what we actually have in debt service.
Are there any other questions regarding that? Go ahead. I can see, but I can't see.
Let's say we're in favor of one option, but changing up some of the terms.
Okay.
Yeah.
What terms are we talking about?
For instance, option 1 speaks about adding $150,000 to the Disengaged Youth Program.
Correct.
But it also proposes cutting $820,000 from the PAC program, which is already being discussed.
That's not option 1. So you've got two options that you're speaking to. So option 5 is the only option in which programs and services are being talked about cut. So when you go back to the back of that booklet, and again, I'm going off memory, I think it starts on page 17 or 18, is that correct? 19?
19.
So on 19, that represents option 5. So in the event that council does not, or the citizens tell us that there's no will to raise property tax or increase other revenues, being the general sales tax, the food tax, or the assessment on the water bill, we still have that $37 million shortfall on the secondary property tax for our debt service. So if there is no will to raise additional revenue, we would have to cut ongoing programs and services. And the way we would do that is that list of $37 million. So we've provided a list of $44 million worth of programs and services to give options for you as the community as well as the council should we go to that route. But option 1 does not have any cuts to services at all. Option 1 is really about increasing the property tax, partially restoring employee compensation at 2.6, doing some other public safety enhancements, and adding some funding for youth and veterans, as well as some restoring of other programs and services that have been cut in the past. That's option 1. That is option 1. So if you go to page 6, you can kind of see and walk through that pretty clearly. So page 6, you'll see the $60 million surplus about halfway down that page. And then underneath that, you see those 4 broad categories: public safety enhancement, partial employee restoration, funding for previously cut services, and then youth and veteran services. So that is how the $60 million would be allocated under option 1, the $60 million surplus. That option also assumes that the property tax rate is adjusted up by 35 cents to deal with the debt service issue.
So because you did such a great job on option 1, why don't we go through option 2, 3, and 4, because it's best.
Sure.
It's
Not a
confusing
problem.
and
Yeah,
it's kind of overwhelming. So why don't we do that?
One quick question on option 1. What are the other surrounding cities' property tax rate that cities are charging in Scottsdale?
Yeah. You know, it's very different. When we presented, and I'll go to the actual chart, when we presented to the council a few weeks ago, when we presented this trial budget, we actually find ourselves somewhat in the middle. What the other cities in the valley, with the exception of Peoria, what they do, they use what's called floating the rate. So every year, they levy what their debt service is. So if property values come down, they raise their rate so that they can levy the same amount of money. That's what most cities in the valley do. We have not done that. So what in the video explained back in the 2000s, the early 2000s, when property values were really growing fast, we built up a reserve. We built up that reserve of $300 million. So when the recession hit in 2008, 2009, and your property value split by about 50%, most of us lost a lot of value in our home values. What the city of Phoenix did, unlike most of the other cities, we said we're going to give our property tax owners, or our homeowners, property tax relief. And rather than raising our rate up, we drew that $300 million fund balance down. And so that kept our rate at $1.82. But now that fund is essentially at its minimum reserve, $75 million. But what the other valley cities, like I say, with the exception of Peoria, they all float their rate up every year to levy the same amount of money. So if their debt service goes up, they take on new debt, they raise their property tax rate up. Now again, it's kind of hard to compare. It's an apples to oranges comparison for a variety of reasons. Take Scottsdale, for instance. Scottsdale's property values are significantly higher than what the median average of a Phoenix home is. So they can keep their property tax relatively low and still levy the same amount of money. That's something that's really, when you start to compare, you can't really make comparisons that way because of things like that. But we're about in the middle of all the cities in the valley when you compare property tax rate. So again, I'll go to page 7 just to walk you through so you can all understand. So option number 2, again, all of these, the first half of the page, all assume about a $60 million surplus because that's what we're talking about, $60 million that we have left over. And one of the things I'd point out, again, before we talk about that is the council directed us to really work really hard. For 16-17, we were initially projecting a deficit of between $31 and $58 million. So what we did is we did a lot of work and we scrubbed a lot of numbers and we were able to shift that from a deficit to a projected surplus. So I think that's important to mention, and I think it's important to give the council kudos for directing staff and pushing us so hard to do that. But page 7 is option 2. So option 2 and option 1 are the exact same. The only difference is the mechanism in which you use to get to your $37 million. So option 2, rather than a property tax increase, we're talking about a 0.125% increase to the general sales tax, which would raise the Phoenix tax rate from 2.3 to roughly 2.4%. It also contemplates a food tax of 1.25% with all of those proceeds going to the general fund, or a $5.25 assessment on the city services bill, also known as the water bill. So those are the 3 differences. So that's how you would close that revenue gap. All the additions are the exact same as option 1. It's just how do you address the $37 million shortfall, okay? So option 3, which is on page 8, where this one is different. So instead of raising taxes and instead of adding any new services or restoring any employee compensation, this option contemplates taking the $60 million surplus and allocating it to the debt service for 2 more years. So what that does is it takes $60 million and it takes and moves it and splits it in half essentially and moves portion of it for fiscal year 16-17 for debt service and the other portion for fiscal year 17-18 for debt service. That means we don't have money for new services. That means we don't have money to restore employee compensation. And what it would mean is that the council would then still have a property tax decision on their hands for fiscal year 18-19 without a fund balance. So that's option 3. Option 4 is essentially kind of a hybrid. So option 4 essentially takes enough for 1 year of property tax increase of the $60 million surplus, about $24 million. The council would have to address property taxes in 17-18 instead of 16-17. You basically buy yourself a year. It would allow us to partially fund the fire electronic patient record system, $2.1 million of a $2.8 million project. So we'd have to find the rest of that money elsewhere as we go through the budget process. And it would partially restore employee compensation. Instead of 2.6%, this would only restore 1.6% of employee compensation. And then you lose all of those other ads. So all the ads for the arts and all the ads for air quality and the youth and the veterans, you would not be able to do that under option 4, okay? Now option 5 is the one that we just discussed a few minutes ago. So again, if there's no will to raise additional revenue, then what we would have to do to ensure that we could pay our debt service would be to draw down our operating budget by $37 million to create $37 million worth of ongoing resources to pay our debt service. So that's where the cuts come in. That's where our cuts starting on page 19 start. So that's when that would kick in. And under that scenario, we would still be able to do pretty much all of the public safety area, and we would also be able to do the 2.6% restoration for our employees, but we would not be able to address the other cuts or expanded services, nor would we be able to address the youth and veterans issues that we pointed out under option 1 and 2. Okay, so that's how the 5 different options work. For those of you who've come to budget hearings in the past, you know this is kind of new. We've never done 5 options. Typically, the trial budget is just one option. You kind of get what you get. But this time, based on some of the feedback from the council, we thought we'd lay out 5 different options to get feedback on, and that's how this is put together.
And during the recession, I was not elected then, but during the recession, all employees took concessions. And the first year that I was elected and was on board, that was the first year that there was a deficit. And I was elected during a time where there was a deficit. And then last year, we balanced the budget, and then today, we're here today. And throughout the whole process, with the all employees groups in their concessions, we have tried to restore year by year by year. And so restoration is part of this budget. And it's not some of my colleagues will say it is not a pay raise. It is not additional dollars. This is restorations from the concessions that they took during the time of the recession. So I just want to be clear on that. Yeah, I don't have all the.
I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but so far, the overwhelming sentiment has been for option 1.
And the reason why I'm asking you for options is because our first 2, or my first 2 budget hearings, they didn't say what the options they wanted. And so I want to get a sense of what options everybody would like to see. So.
Hi, I'd like to ask a question about the compensation cuts. I've read this a couple times in the Arizona Republic that while city employees did take cuts the past 6 years, most continue to receive performance-based bonuses or raises. The impact of such cuts and raises varies from individual employee to employee. Some have made more every year, others have made less. So for a lot of employees, they didn't actually take a cut.
I can't speak to whether or not a lot of employees, but what I can tell you is in total, compensation is down 4.2% based on the contracts that we've initiated. Now, there are some employees who are just starting out in their careers. When you're in the first 5-6 years of your career, you continue to get what's called merit step increases. Those are part of your contract. Those are part of the city's negotiated contract, part of the negotiated benefit. So those steps range from 2 to 5% depending upon the different employee units. So they would get those step increases, but they are still taking their furlough days and doing all those other different things. The employees who've had long tenured and have exceeded the step portion of their career, those employees that have 10, 15, 20 years in, they get what's called longevity pay. Some like to call them bonuses. I call it longevity pay. And what that is, again, it's negotiated into the contracts. And for some employees, it really amounts to not a lot of money. It really doesn't. It just depends on the different employee and depending upon the classification. But again, in total, the entire city is down 4.2%. Employees took that in varying different compensation packages. Some took it all in wage, some took furloughs, some took holiday, some took it in different components. But in total, we're down 4.2%. The value to restore that to the general fund in totality is approximately $44 million a year.
I'm going.
Can the employees still save their vacation and then put it in their retirement package? You know, there was a lot of talk about that was going to be changed.
A lot of that has been changed with council action and as well as citizen
voters.
action with pension reform. So pension reform mitigated and stopped a lot of employees from banking and what they call pension spiking. A lot of that has stopped to the extent that we can. Again, there are contractual obligations, and the state Supreme Court has made rulings that we can only go so far. And I think the city has gone as far as it can possibly go as far as pension spiking is concerned. Now, the public safety employees, they just recently opened up their contracts so that they could work with the legislature to make pension reform on their end as well. Just like in the video said, it is our expectation that over the next 20 years, over the next 2 decades, the pension reform that the council and the citizens have taken for the civilian portion of our pension, it's expected that we're going to save over $1 billion over the next 20 years. Likewise, when the public safety employees, when their pension reform measure goes to the ballot in May, it's expected that that will also save the city upwards of $1 billion over the next 20 years.
I am going to get started. It's probably been a unique budget hearing.
It's okay.
Which is good because there's dialogue. Rosemary Halusha? Did you know, we need you at the mic. I guess, sir, we could.
Yeah, if you come to the mic, we can at least get you on video. So these are broadcast on Phoenix 11. Sure, no problem.
And then Franny Sharp will be next.
Face to face.
Yes.
Actually, we should turn it. You should turn it, Aaron. Aaron, turn the mic so she can face front.
Oh, okay. Good evening. My name is Rosemary Halusha. I've been a Phoenix resident for quite a long time. I come to the budget meetings every year. I've been coming since 2009, and some of my questions were already answered. So I'm going to put in some other ideas. And also of those items, I'm really not sure if I would go for 1 or 2. Laura, I'm not
listening.
sure which.
No,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
listening.
Okay. So
1
I'm
or
just,
2, I'm listening.
I'm just not sure. Thank you. Okay. One of the things I want to talk about is our roads are very dangerous. There's not enough police on the roads, and drivers are out of sight. It's like they're all drunk or on marijuana before we've had that pass. And I think if there were more police cars, that would be really great. It would deter a lot of people from speeding. And I think probably all of you would agree with what I'm saying, because I'm sure you've all experienced this. And this is on our city streets. This isn't on the freeways I'm talking about. This is Thomas Road, Indian Skull, Camelback Road, etc. Another thing I would like to see is to have more park rangers at the parks. Last year, a lady spoke about park rangers, and the city manager said, yes, they were going to get 1 or 2 more. So I didn't really think too much about it until it happened to me that I got stuck in a park, and unfortunately I didn't have my cell phone, and I needed to call the 3As. Well, there was no phone, there was no park ranger, there was nothing. So luckily for me, 2 ladies came by and they let me use their phone. But that's really dangerous if you're in a park by yourself and you don't have anyone to call or anyone to get direction from. I called the ranger office, the main ranger office, and I was informed, well, she said, well, we're only 2 miles away. So what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to walk the 2 miles or what? Okay, now I want to talk about something the city does really, really well. And I hope it never happens, number 5. The pools. I don't know how many of you go to the city pools, but we live in the Encano area and we go to Encano Pool. My daughters learn to swim there. My grandchildren learn to swim there. I'm a swimmer. The swimming lessons that lifeguards give to the children is just amazing. And they learn in a week or 2. They can swim every stroke. They also have swimming meets
and that makes them better swimmers, the older kids, I mean. My granddaughter is a champion swimmer, and she got a lot of that training at the city pools, in Cano Pool, Deer Valley. She is now a junior lifeguard, and in her first year at Thunderbird this past September, she made varsity, and her first meet, she came in 4th place in the whole school. My other grandchildren are also good swimmers. But what I'm saying is that if you don't go swimming, to me, you're missing out, and our pools are fabulous. And I come down every year, and I beg them not to close them, not to stop and to close their hours. It's only 8 weeks. We used to have 16 weeks, but as I said, they have, you know, for children and swimming and families and competition. You just can't beat them. And so I would say get out of your bathtub pool in your yard and get down to a real 50-meter Olympic-sized pool. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you. I did fail to mention that we're limiting our comments to 2 minutes.
Okay.
But you were fine. No.
And then Eddie Jenna. My name is Franny Sharp. I'm a resident of District 4, and I'm also the Program and Outreach Manager with the Arizona Center for After School Excellence. We are a nonprofit that serves as the state's leading advocacy and resource center for after-school programs. I'm here to oppose option 5, specifically the proposed elimination of 24 Phoenix After School Center or PAC sites, as well as 10 teen centers. PAC provides a crucial service for low-income families here in Phoenix. PAC is a low-cost, out-of-school time youth program that provides safe and healthy environments as well as enriching learning opportunities for children in grades 1 through 8. During the 2014-2015 school year, PAC served over 3,300 kids at 42 sites, and 90% of these youth were eligible for free and reduced lunch at the schools at which they attend. The PAC program has already endured enormous cuts since the economic downturn. In 2007, PAC served 9,000 kids at over 120 sites. And since then, the need for PAC has only grown. According to the most recent Kids Count report, the percentage of single-parent families in Phoenix has increased from 38% in 2008 to 45% in 2014. And the number of Phoenix children living in poverty has increased from 118,000 to 137,000, which is over a third of children living in Phoenix. The PAC programs give these kids important experiential learning opportunities at a low cost to their families. And the city funds that are spent on these programs, we see payback from. It decreases school absenteeism, it reduces poor behavior. It's an investment that pays over tenfold over time. And support for PAC and programs like it is huge in Arizona. According to a 2014 study, 84% of parents support public funding for after-school programs. So on behalf of the Arizona Center for After School Excellence, I urge you to support a plan that stops these cuts to this important program so that the city can continue to provide safe, healthy, and enriching after-school environments for our youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Eddie Jenna, and then Jesus Adami.
Good evening. Oop. How's that? Good evening. Oh, thank you. I would break it, so. Hi, my name is Eddie Jenna. I'm a member of the board of Central Arizona Shelter Services, or CAS. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the homeless. I urge you to support option 1 and to oppose option 5. Under the proposed cuts, CAS would endure a $52,000 cut. This is on top of the $180,000 in cuts since 2009. CAS serves over 4,700 unique persons every year, 62% of whom stay less than 3 weeks in our shelter. These cuts would dramatically increase the length of the stay and also would reduce the support services provided to the homeless. It would be penny wise and pound foolish to cut these services, as many police and fire calls, as well as ER visits, are for the homeless population, and we know that those are of great expense. I knew I had a short amount of time. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
After Jesus is David Howell.
As they said, my name is Jesus Adame. I'm a 65-year-old native of the city of Phoenix. I'm also a retired firefighter, and I have a son on the job who gave up that 4.2% in the last couple of years. I think, as the gentleman said on the video, our employees are our most important asset, and we should treat it as such. And the city came to the employees a number of years ago and told them they had a problem, and together they gave up a lot. They gave up 4.2%. I don't know exactly what that is in finances and money, but I mean, if you compound that within the last 8 years, that's a substantial amount. Well, now the city's starting to see a little green, and they would just like to be made whole again. And I think the city talked about it per capita, police and fire have got the least amount, or one of the fewest amounts within the major cities. That increases, that means that their workload has increased. Less employees mean more work. Now you've taken 4.2% of their salary. I would just like to encourage the council and those budget people to restore their salary, and I would choose option 1. Thank you very much.
Next, Katie Pates after David Howell.
Madam Councilwoman, staff, my name is David Howell. I'm a resident of the Encano Palmcroft neighborhood. I have lived there since 1986. Each of us who gets up here is likely to be representing some particular piece of the budget. Well, I represent 2. I serve on both the Phoenix Public Library Foundation and the Phoenix Friends of Public Art. And I'm here to, 1, support option 1. None of us like a tax increase, but if we want the services, we have to pay for them. So we support the city manager's trial budget recommendation of an increase in revenue as a long-term solution to the city's budget problems. We also support the city manager's proposal to partially restore, and hopefully these are steps in the right direction, previously made cuts to the Arts and Culture Grants Program. The current proposal calls for a $50,000 increase. We don't support, however, cuts to the Cultural Facilities Management and Property Management Services. Those will have a negative impact on several critical arts organizations in Phoenix, Phoenix Art Museum, Phoenix Theater, and the Children's Museum of Phoenix, to mention a few. We also are firm believers that you need to maintain the investments you make, and the investments the city has made in public art need to be maintained. Currently, only half of the annual needed revenue is budgeted each year, about $50,000 out of the $100,000 that is projected. We have some wonderful public art installations in this city, 180 or so around the city in total. If we don't maintain them, it's another one of those penny wise or pound foolish formulas. An increase in the maintenance funding for those maintaining that art, I think, is critical. On the library side, once upon a time, every Phoenix City library was open 7 days a week and had the same hours. In the economic downturn, the library system, to play its part in helping balance the city's budget, has trimmed days and hours. I would love to see us back on a pathway to get our libraries open 7 days a week, full-time, full service, as I think the citizens need and deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ilya Risk.
So, first off, I'm here to be in favor of option 1, oppose option 5. Thank you for handling that buzz. That's really great. And I'm just going to read off my notes to make sure that I stay within the time frame. So, good evening, Councilwoman Pastor and District 4. My name is Katie Pates, and I am a governing board member of the Osborne School District here in this district. Our schools are nationally recognized for their high achievement, their innovative programs, and being a caring place for our children. It's amazing what we accomplish in a fiscal desert as well. Budget cuts have forced us to eliminate teaching positions in technology and the arts, positions in health, community liaisons, support professionals, and a reduction in salaries to balance our budgets. We know what it's like to make hard decisions. The strength of our district and continued success always has lain within the process to gather feedback at the service level on what our most immediate needs are in the district. And I'm here to discuss the impact the PAC program has on our schools and our community. Osborne houses 2 PAC programs, and to prepare for today, I talked with kids, parents, principals, and PAC employees to validate its value before I publicly commented. I urge you to maintain and expand PAC programs, which could be possible, and I have 3 reasons why. First, it's in high demand. Second, it's high quality. And third, it's an innovative partnership that creates dynamic, diverse communities. First, it's in high demand. Parents have to submit applications at least 4 months in advance to be considered, and Osborne's PAC program regularly has at least 60 kids on their wait lists. When I asked Stephen, a parent of 2 kids in PAC, why he enrolled his kids, he said, "I spent time in Phoenix City after-school programs. They gave me a place and a purpose and kept me safe. Now I'm a licensed plumber, able to support my family. That's why my daughters attend PAC." Second, it's high quality. PAC provides affordable, safe, and structured education environments. I'm also been an educator for 10 years, so I know what I'm talking about in this arena. When I looked at this next month's curriculum, Selena, the recreation leader, had planned activities in robotics, literacy, PE, movement, anti-bullying, relationship building, arts, and math. She creates an agile curriculum that will best meet the needs of the children in the program, and she pays out of pocket for extra incentives for the kids. PAC is the only place in the school that has embedded cross-grade level instruction and interaction 5 days a week, and it's head and shoulders above private education agencies in both quality of service and integrity of fund. Finally, third, it's a partnership that creates dynamic, diverse communities. Dynamic, diverse communities start with connected youth. To reduce the number of disconnected youth, we have to start young. The Phoenix City staff and school leaders work together to implement these strategies in healthy relationships, healthy minds, and healthy bodies. I met Damien, a 7th grader. He regularly mentors Alex, a 3rd grader, on homework and how to solve problems with his peers. Also, once a month, a nutritional expert comes from the city of Phoenix and visits our programs and teaches about healthy nutrition and well-being. So to finish, I know you have hard decisions to make to balance your budget, but coming from the ground level, PAC is in high demand, it's high quality, and it's innovative. Please remember Stephen and his daughters, Damien and Alex, and the 3,300 students and their families. I invite you to visit our programs at any time to see firsthand the incredible work our city does, and implore you to prioritize funding for programs that already meet the needs of our working families.
Nicole Rodriguez. I'm sorry, he's first.
And then you're next.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Ilya Risky, and I live in Council District 4. I'm speaking as a private citizen, homeowner, and currently serve as an Arts and Culture Commissioner for the city. Thank you for your past support of the Arts and Culture Grants Program and other initiatives of the Arts and Cultural Commission, which for over 30 years has championed the development, promotion, and sustainability of Phoenix's vibrant cultural community. I'd like to express my support for the city manager's trial budget recommendation, option 1, including the revenue increase. I support the city manager's proposal to partially restore previously made cuts to the Arts and Culture Grants Program. If option 1 is not approved by the council, I would like to express that I do not support option 5's cuts to cultural facilities management, property management services, which would negatively impact operations at the Phoenix Art Museum, Phoenix Theater, and Children's Museum of Arizona. I believe arts are important to all, and grant funding to Phoenix arts and cultural organizations increases the yearly amount of free arts programming available to young people, and these programs help students develop critical and creative thinking skills, learn to work cooperatively, build social skills and self-confidence, all of which would help them succeed in today's world. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. Next is Nicole, and then Felicitas Kennard.
Well, I'm happy to follow someone that's tall. No, this is great. This is the first year it's actually been at my height, so thank you. So I served in the community of Longview. I'm in District 4, and I wanted to say I'm in favor of option 1. And as far as I know, the people in my community are in favor of option 1 or 2, from what I've heard back from my community. I do serve as a president of a neighborhood association, so I'm here to speak for myself, but partly on behalf of them. And while we are wanting an increase in the amount of money that's allocated to our services that we depend on every day, we're also having issues with the quality of service we are receiving currently. And I don't know if it's a cause and effect thing to where possibly the amount of money that has been reduced over the years, so it has the quality of service. But what I do miss is the emphasis on seamless service. That used to be one of the mottos of the city of Phoenix. It was probably about 8 years ago. They really impressed it upon the employees to provide great service all the time. So if I called and got the wrong number, I would immediately be transferred over to, even if it was a completely different department. We're not getting that anymore from what I'm hearing from my citizens. And every year I've come here, I've always spoken up for officers. I'm impartial about the body cameras because of the amount of money that's allocated to that. It blew me away when I saw how much it is, because what I'm hearing is stuff about PAC, the arts, the homeless, and a lot of that money that is needed for the young kids could actually prevent future homelessness. This is what I've been learning from the Phoenix Mission and a few of the other homeless outreach groups. So if we could also think about allocating money towards that, if not in this round, in the next round, because I don't feel that it's enough that we're pushing towards those programs. But it's great that there is money that is being sought after for them. And the other few small things is that when we want more from our city, I hope we can also, as citizens, provide more as well. We need to get out there in our communities and be very grassroots in how we are involved with our neighbors, our communities, with our council districts, because we also have a role. And if you don't like option 1 or 2, I hope you're out there doing your volunteer and stewardship to your community. So with that, that's all I had to share. And thank you for serving us. I appreciate it.
Next is Felicitas, and then Brent Kleinman.
Yes, fine, thank you. My name is Felicitas Canard. I'm a single parent. I'm also a veteran of the Armed Forces. I want to say thank you for coming up and talking about PAC. I support option 1 and really wanted to stay from option 5. PAC has supported me. My children are part of the Osborne District in Canto and Clarendon. My kids are 3rd and 4th grade, and I moved here because of the school and the PAC program. And they've been here. They're both here as well. And they've helped me as a single parent. Otherwise, if we don't have these programs, the children now will become what my generation was. We were latchkey kids. And these kids will find other things to do. We'll find other things to do. May not be good, may not be bad. So because of them and the PAC program, I'm able to do good things, and I don't have to worry about my children. I'm also thankful, too, as well as in support of the veterans, because I can very well be homeless myself, and then I would have to rely on CAS. I work for Phoenix College, and I see veterans who come in all the time looking for help. And I see a lot of them veterans who are homeless, so thank you very much. You want to say something, Joshua? Say your name.
My name is Joshua Lada. Hello.
Okay, Brent Kleinman, and then Kevin Kaufmer. I'm saying that right.
I now feel like I should have brought someone with me. That my presentation might be a little less impressive. But first of all, to the last speaker, thank you very much for your service to our country, because that's what's so impressive. I do live in Councilwoman Pastor's district as well, and in Canto Palmcroft, and I am excited about, I guess as excited as I can get about paying more money, trial option 1 with this. But I do have some questions and concerns, I guess, that probably want to put forward with, we're putting aside money for years 1 and 2 of this restoration of funds. Where does that money in the budget come from for years 3 and 4 down the road? How are we planning for that? Where's that excess surplus going to be? Because I know we have the 60 million right now that we're putting this aside. Are we looking at 2 years of asking these city employees to take cuts again, freezing them? Will we have money for that is a concern of mine. And also another concern of mine is our state governor is putting aside some threats that say if cities don't do exactly what the state's doing, we have a very smart city council here, and we are doing things that are best for our citizens that may not go in line with the state legislature. Are we setting some money aside if we happen to lose some of that state revenue, if he absolutely chooses somehow to follow through on that and we have to fight him in court? Is that money being set aside, or are we going to have to look at cuts when that happens? So those are a couple of my concerns with that, and that's all I've got.
Sure. So, Mr. Kleinman, in regards to the contract, so we do 2-year employee contracts. And so the way the city manager's option number 1 budget is laid out, we are setting aside the money for option for year 1 and year 2 of those contracts. The thought behind that is when we went back to the council in early March and presented for them our 5-year forecast, on the horizon, again, dependent upon the economy and what happens nationwide, there could be a softening of the economy. And as a result of that, there are some years where we're really not sure as to whether or not if we're going to be balanced or not balanced. And as a result of that, we thought it made good financial sense while we had the cash on hand, rather than to give the employees money today and then take it back tomorrow. We thought it made sense to kind of lay out some set-asides to ensure that we could pay them for 2 years. Okay. It also provides us an opportunity for year 3 to really get a head start on trying to find money to fix those deficits in those years where we may potentially have shortfalls. So that's the first part. In regards to the state shared revenue piece, there are some veiled threats every single year. That's just the latest that we have this year.
That's a new one, though.
From state share. Yeah, that's a new one. What we do on those and the way we handle that, right now that's actually being looked at by the League of Cities and Towns. So it's not just going to be Phoenix that's looking to fight that. It may be the league that actually looks to fight that. But in the event that we would have to make those cuts, or they take money from us, we have a number of different things we could look to. We could look to our contingency fund, which is our emergency reserve fund, if we had to kind of replenish that or use that as seed money to pay for legal bills. We could also possibly hit our SIR. We're self-insured. We could possibly even hit that for some of our legal expenses as a means to doing that. So we have some options. We don't set money aside to deal with potential lawsuits because, again, you never know where those are going to come from. But we have a contingency.
I guess my concern, I'm not sure I'm stating, isn't the money to pay for the lawsuit, but
it's the money for loss of state, the loss of revenue.
Withheld, yes.
Right. No, in the event that that were to be, if that were to happen, what we would have to do is we'd have to find money, either find resources or find services that could be trimmed down or find vacant positions or whatever to reduce our costs. Or we, again, have the contingency that we could live off of until those monies are returned to the city once that lawsuit is finished.
Thank you.
Sure.
Kevin, and then Marshall Pimentel.
Good evening. Good evening. My name's Kevin Cotmer. I'm a resident of District 4 and a City of Phoenix firefighter. I'm here tonight to urge Councilwoman Pastor to please restore police and fire's compensation to 2010 levels by increasing their current rate 4.2% as agreed upon in past negotiations. Since that date, public safety has stepped to the plate every contract year of the Great Recession, doing more with less to do our part and help the city and its taxpayers save approximately $500 million through staffing reductions to the tune of 721 less police officers and firefighters on the streets of Phoenix. That staffing reduction, coupled with an increase in violent crime and a 30% spike in fire responses, equates to both agencies being strained more than I've ever seen in my 16-year career. I feel that we have been there for the city during the down revenue years. Given that the city's general fund revenues are currently the highest they've been in Phoenix's history, I think it's only fair that the city leadership use a fraction of the increased revenue to keep the promise made during the bad times and restore the 4.2% in temporary cuts police and fire took during that time of need. Adjusted for inflation, that 4.2% pay reduction is an 18% decrease in buying power for police officer and firefighter families. As a new father myself, with all the expenses that go along with that journey, I can attest that that 18% decrease in overall income number is accurate. We're not asking for a raise, just to be put back where we were 6 years ago, when our fire stations were 30% less busy and our police precincts were adequately staffed. With that, I plead with you, Councilwoman Pastor, to please do the right thing and support your local police and firefighters. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marshall Pimentel. I too agree with the sentiments of my coworkers over here. I am the president of one of the locals for Unit 2, blue collar employees. And one of the things that he reiterated is, or in this room, what I'm hearing from the citizens is that we definitely want to take care of our services. We want to make sure that we provide that service at the best quality possible. And in order to do that, it's going to take some leadership, and it's also going to take some employees that are going to actually provide those services to the best of our ability. The employees are essentially part of the community. They're part of the family. They're everybody to your left and right sometimes. We don't know who they are. But one of the things that I really want to stress is that from what I hear in this room is that we want to support those services, and we want to support the employees that provide them. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the community for believing in us. 6 years ago, we did have concessions, and we did service to be able to help out the community and be able to get to where we are now. We lived through the Great Recession of Phoenix, and according to a lot of the other places that we get our information from, the Moody's report, the Standards & Poor, the city of Phoenix has a zero chance of going back into recession. We're doing really well. So I really hope that, the sentiment that I hear today is something that we follow, and we figure out a way to get out of there, get out of the concessions, and we move forward as a community to retain everything. And I just want to say again, thank you for your understanding and support. And also I'd like to thank Councilwoman Pastor for her leadership during these rough times. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. So those are all the cards. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right, well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You have been watching a community budget hearing held recently in Phoenix. For questions, comments, or ideas, please visit phoenix.gov or call 602-262-4800. You can also send feedback through social media by using #PhoenixBudget. This video can also be seen online at phoenix.gov/PHXTV or youtube.com/City of Phoenix AZ.